All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Dear Dr. Fantasy. And for my very special guest today, someone that I have had the privilege of talking with before on the channel and on his channel as well. And it is none other than Bookish Chas. Hello, Chas. How are you today?
Hey, I'm great, Philip. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
It is
I
my pleasure. I've been looking forward to this very much.
Yeah, I have to. When I got your email request, I was like, oh, I'm very honored to be on the show.
Well, it is a wonderful community full of all kinds of great folks, and I always have a great time chatting with people. And of course, you've been around on BookTube for quite some time, haven't you? When did you start your channel?
Yeah, I started in, let's see, goodness, was it 2018, I think, or no,
2018.
2020, maybe 2019. So I'm coming up on 4 years. So whatever that was, I guess that would
Okay.
be 2019. But
2019.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
August will be 4 years for me.
Okay. So you started
Yeah.
about a year before I did then. Yeah.
Mhm.
And have you, in these 4 years, what changes have you observed in the BookTube community, if any?
Oh wow, lots of changes. When I first started, I first started watching BookTube, and there were several out there, but just a few were really popular, like Daniel Green and Elliot Brooks and things like that.
Yeah.
And then after I started, it seemed to just explode. Yeah, just everybody was starting a channel, and a lot of people started doing the long form discussions like this. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I guess I came in at the right time, because yeah, but it's I don't want to say it's taken the place of book blogs, because a lot of people do still book blog. Like I think Patrick still does his, and I know a few others do as well. But
Yeah.
I think video is probably the format that a lot of people are going to when they want to get book reviews and things like that. So
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
because
Interesting.
they can play it in the background and things. So yeah, it seems to have really exploded. Lots of changes, lots of new
Yeah.
faces, and yeah, it's been
Yeah.
great.
Just in the time that I've been around, these 3.5 years, it does seem like things change fairly rapidly in the community. Like something becomes popular or some format becomes popular, and that's done for a while, then it moves on to something else. And famously, we're moving away from reviews, although honestly, I think reviews are always going to be a thing
Oh
because
yeah.
that's really, to me, the backbone, that and discussions, essentially. But maybe shorter form content has become a sort of challenge to that sort of thing. I don't know. But yeah, it's interesting to think about how in the very, I don't know how long BookTube has been a thing. Not longer than YouTube's been a thing, obviously, but it's interesting to see how in that short time of its existence, it has evolved, a fair amount.
Hmm.
But why did you start your channel? Why, obviously you're not somebody who's like, well, because a lot of people I know started during the pandemic, and it was just sort of, well, I was home and I wanted to talk with people and that sort of thing. But
Hmm.
you started earlier. So what were your motivations in throwing your hat into the ring?
Yeah, great question. Give me just a minute. I think we got some background noise. I don't know if you can hear it.
Oh, I
Hang
can't
on.
hear a thing.
Oh,
All I hear is
perfect.
you. Yeah.
No, that's good. Okay,
Yeah.
great. So yeah, my motivations initially were to just start watching BookTube, to get some ideas of new books I can read, because
Yeah.
in my I've always been a reader, but I didn't start really getting back into a lot of fiction until I was, oh gosh, I was in my late 20s, early 30s when I started really getting back into fiction. And
Okay.
I read Lord of the Rings for the first time at that point. I'd
Hmm.
never read it before. So I
Wow.
I got to a point where I was on the hunt for new ideas for books to read, and I started watching BookTube, and I had a lot of books that I loved as well, and so I thought, I think this is something that I would enjoy. I enjoy public speaking. Um, I was kind of at a loss for having a lot of people to talk about books with as well, so I figured it would be a neat way to make some bookish friends and people to talk with. So
Yeah, yeah,
so
it
that
certainly
was
is that.
that was my motivation. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, that's kind of how it is for all. I think most of us would share those motives for sure. Well, that's wonderful. So that really makes me curious. You said that you read Lord of the Rings for the first time in your late 20s, early 30s, and you became a reader then. So that's probably a very natural segue then for me to ask my standard question for the program, which is going on the premise that you are what you read.
Mhm.
Chaz, what have been some of the formative reads of your life, going all the way back to little Chaz?
Oh boy. Yeah. Yeah, that is definitely a great question. Um, well, I did read I read a lot from my grandmother's library, believe it or not. So in my adolescent teen years, I read things like Mary Stuart, the Arthur
Wonderful.
saga.
Yeah.
Um, I read a lot of Agatha Christie, I would just always go over to her house, and I'd find new books on her bookshelf that I could read. And she had a lot of Agatha Christie, uh, Mary Stuart, of course. She had some others as well that I don't remember offhand, but
Yeah.
that was very formative to me. And of course, as a young child, I read a lot. They had summer reading programs at the library, and this school sponsored reading programs, and I read some of the Hardy Boys mysteries,
Okay.
uh,
Yeah.
and yeah.
Mary Stewart
So
is an author that I read many years ago, and really she's got gorgeous prose. I would say
mhm.
that she is most definitely not well served on BookTube. You don't hear people talking about Mary Stewart very often. BookTube definitely does skew kind of toward the more current reads, the more current books. And Mary Stewart was writing her Merlin or Arthurian series back in the what 70s, I think it might have been.
Yeah,
It was a
I
while
think
back.
so.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So yeah, she's one that I wouldn't mind seeing a little more attention put on her beautiful writing. Although
Yeah.
I probably would guess that a lot of modern fantasy readers would not have the patience for that style of writing, which was much more descriptive than what people are used to these days. I would imagine that some people would probably struggle with the amount of, although it's gorgeous, of the amount of description. What do you think?
Oh yes, absolutely. From what I remember, and it's been a long time since I read the books, but from what I remember, very descriptive, beautiful writing. I would compare it in some respects to the level of writing that Tolkien achieved.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
That era was very heavy on that style of writing, I think.
Yeah.
And um, so yeah, I imagine that some people might find it a bit more archaic today.
Yeah.
Uh, and I am planning to do a reread of it. I got
Oh.
I got the omnibus of the first three books, and then I know there's a fourth book that's kind of part of the series, but also kind of not. So, um,
Yeah.
but I am planning to do a reread of those first three books. So I'll probably make some content on it, and we'll see if we can
Cool.
get some people checking it out.
Yeah. Starting
I
with the
have
Crystal Cave. Yeah.
exactly. And
Uh,
I have found a lot of people when I mentioned it briefly in some of my videos. I've had some people comment and say that they really like Mary Stewart. So
uh-huh.
yeah, so there's an audience for her for sure.
Yes. Good. Yeah. Of course, you and I are not the oldest, but among some of the older booktubers out there. So
Yeah.
we're probably more likely to run across others who have read Mary Stewart's books. But yeah, she's a great one. And I think a good model for maybe if you're trying to write something that is going to be super popular today, then maybe you don't want to write quite like that. But if you want to look at somebody who really knew how to write, then I think it would behoove you to take a look at what Mary Stewart does in those Merlin books. It's some beautiful stuff. So well,
Yeah, it
good.
really is.
So let's talk some more about your reading journey then. So these were your kind of your grandmother's place. You got to read some of the books there, Agatha Christie and all that. And then what happened during your teenage years?
During my teenage years, I was, very involved in school, and I got a lot more into movies and things like that than I really spent time reading. Although I did start way back then. I started the Wheel of Time. I read part of the first book of the Wheel of Time, and at that time, I don't know, it just didn't didn't click with me. Maybe it was too long. I was at that stage of my growth where I'm a teenager, so I've got other things to distract me, and so it wasn't something that I continued with.
Uh-huh.
The Sword of Shannara was one of my favorite books back that time.
Okay, yeah, and I believe that Terry Brooks is still one of your favorite authors, correct?
He is.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's still
yeah.
one of my favorites. Yeah.
And now, so you, of course, then would have read Sword of Shannara before reading Lord of the Rings, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, I did.
interesting. So
Yeah.
because I did the reverse, I read Lord of the Rings first, and it's probably a shame in a way that I did it that way because I read Terry Brooks' Sword of Shannara, and
Hmm.
I, as a probably, I don't know, I was in my late teens or maybe early 20s, and I dismissed it right away. I thought, okay, I read the whole book and I thought, this is just a ripoff of Lord of the Rings. I'm not interested in that. And I didn't think about it for many, many years, but then later heard, well, actually, yes, the first book is pretty much a ripoff of Lord of the Rings. But after that, he really goes his own direction. And similar to what Robert Jordan does with The Wheel of Time and The Eye of the World being very, very obviously inspired in many ways by Lord of the Rings. But he also goes in his own direction with the series. So I did read all of Wheel of Time because I was older and probably a little more tolerant when I was older. I recognized that the first book was definitely a Tolkien nod of a sort. But I was older and I just kept reading Wheel of Time, whereas I've never have gone back to the Shannara series, and I want to do that someday. So tell me about do a little sales job for me on Shannara if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was lucky enough that I didn't remember a whole lot of the Sword of Shannara when I read Lord of the Rings. So after I read Lord of the Rings, I've since reread the Sword of Shannara and continued the series.
Yeah.
And yeah, so the first book is very derivative. You're absolutely right. Elfstones of Shannara is much less so. In
Hmm.
fact, Terry recommends most people start with Elfstones.
Oh,
Uh,
really? Okay.
just because it's more it's more of a true picture of who he is as a writer.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, and Wish Song of Shannara was really excellent. I think my favorite series so far is either the Druid of Shannara series, which is the second subset, and
Okay.
uh and then the Voyage of the Jurl Shannara, which is kind of like if you like live ship, if you
I
like
do. Yeah.
nautical fantasy and stuff like that, the Jurl Shannara is an airship that features very heavily in the books.
Interesting.
So
So
and it's
what reading order do you recommend? Because well, first of all, how many Shannara books are there? It's like a gazillion, right, or
oh
something.
yeah, there's a gazillion. I would recommend publication order,
Okay.
with the exception that Terry Brooks said to start with Elfstone. So you may want to start with Elfstone since you've already read the Sword of Shannara
Well,
yourself.
it was a long time ago. It was probably more than 30 years ago. So,
Yeah, and luckily he has reading orders published on his website. He has a reading order for
oh,
people who are coming back to the series, and he has one for new readers. But I still think publication order is probably the best way to go. I'm
okay.
sure Scott the Bald Booktuber would agree with me on that.
Uh-huh. Yeah, he's another Terry Brooks fan.
Yeah, and he's definitely for publication order. But
Oh,
the,
yes, and
yeah,
he's all about publication order. Yes, got it.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay,
The
so
the
publication order sounds simple to me. That's easy to remember.
Yeah, and the nice thing about Shannara is every he breaks it up into smaller trilogies and stories.
Okay,
So you can easily read 3 books and be done, and then you can decide, oh well, maybe I won't read any more right now, or maybe I'll come back to it in the future. And then you could pick up the Druid of Shannara series, and you could read that, or the Heritage of
okay,
Shannara is one as well. So
okay,
there's it's very easily digestible because you don't have to read the entire series to be satisfied.
okay. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he also did write
Oh, we have a little bit of an interruption there.
uh, to enjoy
Oh, I
is written.
think.
So,
Okay, can you repeat the last thing you said, Chaz? Because we got interrupted there.
oh, oh yeah, no problem. Um, he uh he writes it in such a way that you don't need to uh necessarily have read the first 2 or 3 book series to enjoy
Okay.
others.
Okay.
uh, because each trilogy is a complete story. But if you want more of the background and everything, you do want to start with the
Yeah.
earlier series that he wrote. So
All right, that's good. That's
yeah.
useful. But that's a
Mhm.
nice feature, I would say, that you don't have to feel like you have to read all whatever it is, 30 books. It's not a gazillion, whatever it is. You don't have to read all the books. Boom, 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 boom. You can do a trilogy and then come back to it after a few months and that sort of thing. That sounds nice. Yeah, I like that. A little bit like some of
Yeah,
the
that
elderlings, then a little bit
it
like the elder.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely a nice feature of Robin Hobb's writing as well.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And is there a chronological break in between the various
Excuse me.
trilogies? In other words, is there a gap in years between the trilogies, or does it vary according to trilogy?
It varies according to the trilogy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. Yeah,
But it's all the
it
same world.
it is.
All these various series and trilogies, whatever they are. Are they mostly trilogies, or does he mess around with other lengths?
There's mostly trilogies. He's got the Heritage of Shannara is actually a 4 book series.
Okay.
The I believe it's the Legends of Shannara is a 2 book series.
Okay.
But for the most part, he writes trilogies. And actually, the Fall of Shannara, the final one, is 4 books as well.
Okay.
So
And you've read all of them, every Terry Brooks Shannara book?
I haven't yet.
Oh, okay.
I have read the first 3 sagas. So Sword of Shannara, the Heritage of Shannara, and the Druid of Shannara. Oh no, I'm sorry. I have also read the Voyage of the Jewel Shannara, so 4. And
Okay.
I've also read the first King of Shannara, which is a prequel to the first trilogy.
Okay. Okay.
So
Oh, interesting. Okay.
yeah. so I haven't finished the series yet. It is a bit daunting, but
Yeah, it's massive. I mean, I keep saying, I believe that he's written a phenomenal number of books. I have to
yeah,
look up how many
I
to
do
make
believe it's
sure.
about 30, if I'm not
I was said
mistaken.
30 earlier. That was a wild
Mm,
guess, honestly. But somebody in the comments would definitely tell us. But I'm just gonna look it up anyway.
yeah.
How many Shannara books are there? 30 plus. Well, that's helpful. Uh,
Yeah, we were on the right track.
I mean, okay. I'm not getting a conclusive answer here by just Googling it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Um, okay, why are you okay? There are all kinds of recommendations on how to read this series out there. This is what I'm getting when I Google this. All right, well, we'll figure that out later. So,
Hmm.
in terms of what you've read though of Shannara, how would you characterize the series? Would you it's epic fantasy? What are there certain themes that Terry Brooks likes to focus on that you've noticed or anything like that? Or and how would you describe the characters, that sort of thing?
Yeah, great question. I definitely epic fantasy. At least the books that I read so far are definitely a nod to more of your classic style fantasy,
Okay.
like the Dragonlance. Well, actually, I haven't read Dragonlance, but I've read other Weiss and Hickman, and it's
Okay.
very much kind of in that genre.
Okay.
Um, but uh, yeah, and it's definitely adventure fantasy too. So, and I
Okay.
don't know that I think there's a slight distinction there between the two, but probably not much.
Huh.
Um, he does focus on a lot of different themes that I picked up. Um, most of which are trust, learning to trust people. There's a lot of your classic parties. You know, you're forming a party and you're going out to accomplish this
The
goal. And
quest
so
party.
yeah,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
quest party, yes.
Yeah.
So you've got learning to build trust among your teammates, and learning the art of forgiveness,
Okay.
um, and he definitely subverts uh, uh, gender tropes as well, in terms of the fact that he has a lot of very powerful and well thought of female characters. So
Okay.
it's not a male dominated story by any means. There's
Okay.
some very powerful female characters that come into the picture and
Great.
are heavily focused on. So I really like that as well.
Nice. Do you
Yeah.
know if he has a relationship to gaming? In other words, was he a D&D player or that sort of thing? And did that influence his writing?
You know, I don't know if he has a gaming background.
Okay.
From what I know, I don't think he does. I know he started writing his books when he was still a lawyer.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So he was practicing law before he got into fantasy full time, and
Yeah,
uh,
all we writers need day jobs, unfortunately.
right, right, yeah.
Not a lawyer. Okay, he probably did pretty well. Yeah.
He was definitely a big reader though, and that definitely shows in sort of Shannara, Lord of the Rings nods, and um,
Yeah.
but yeah, to my knowledge, he's not really a gamer.
Okay.
I think D&D became really popular uh, when he was quite a bit older. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, because I believe Sword of Shannara was in the late 70s.
Hmm.
And I'm not sure when D&D was invented, but it was getting really popular right around that time. It was beginning, I think. And then in the 80s, certainly
Hmm.
when I was a teenager, I was playing it. So yeah, it was pretty popular then. So
Yeah, it was definitely big in the 80s and 90s, and so
oh
yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
I think I guess I would say that he was probably he was probably in his middle age at that point. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Interesting. Okay, cool. Well,
yeah.
there we have one of your big, I think, favorite authors, right? For
Oh
sure.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's easily in my top 5.
Yeah. Another
Yeah.
one that I know is in your top 5, and this one we kind of sort of have in common, although I have to read a lot more by him, is Neil Gaiman. You're a big
Oh
Gaiman fan.
yes,
Yeah.
I certainly am.
When did you first read Neil Gaiman?
I first read him. Oh boy, I believe I had just hit my mid-30s at that point.
Okay, okay.
Yeah,
A little bit later, and
and
when you
yeah,
went back to reading and all
hmm,
that, in your late 20s, early 30s. Nice.
yeah,
And what
yeah.
among his stuff? I think it's the Sandman that you love the most. Is that right, or is there
Uh,
something else?
it's definitely one of my favorites,
Okay.
but Ocean at the End of the Lane is my current
Oh,
favorite.
it's so
Yeah,
gorgeous. Yeah.
it is. It's a gorgeous book. It's actually my favorite book of all time so far,
Ocean
anyway.
at the End of the Lane. Wow.
Yeah, it's
Good
just
choice. I like it.
yeah, I just I've just had such a wonderful experience reading it. It means a lot to me, and I think it means so much to me partly because it's about a boy who grew up in a small town and the adventures he had, and I grew up in
Yeah.
a small town myself. So
Yeah.
uh, that was not the first game I read. The first one I read was Neverwhere,
Okay.
uh, and then uh, and then I believe after that, my next book that I read by him was American Gods. At that time, Ocean had not come out yet.
Oh,
So
I see. Okay.
yeah, so
Yeah, that I mean, Ocean at the End of the Lane is such a dreamlike experience. There are a few books that I would put in this category of you read them and you feel like you've just emerged from a dream. And that's one of
yes.
them. Piranesi is another one.
Oh,
Maybe Patrick Rothfuss's The Slow Regard of Silent Things would be another
I
one.
love that book.
And
It's not well liked among a
it is
lot of the
not, yeah,
fans, but I
which
love it.
I like it too. I actually like
Yeah.
it.
It's my favorite King Killer book, actually. It's
Oh, really? Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
Ari's such a beautiful character.
I think she is. I love
Yeah.
her as a character, and I'm glad that Rothfuss wrote that novella. I hope he writes Doors of Stone at
I
some
hope so
point or other.
too.
He's tinkering around with some other novella or something now, I think.
Yeah, he's writing an expansion. Well, he wrote an expansion to the Lightning Tree, which was a short story he wrote for the Rogues anthology, and
Uh-huh.
it's a really great story. It's about Bast, and
Okay. I like
so
Bast,
I
so
like Bast too. So he wrote an expansion. He turned it into more of a short novel than a short story at this point. So
okay.
I'm excited to get my hands on it and see what changed because it was a great story. It was a lot of fun.
I haven't read the short story, but I'll probably check out the novella when it's published. But
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
that was fun, and I've yet to read Piranesi. It's on my list for next month. So
oh, interesting. Well, yeah,
yeah,
predict that you'll probably enjoy it. Yeah.
I I think I will. From what you've told me and from what I've heard other people say,
Yeah.
I'm very excited to read it. I have not read Jonathan Strange, but
That's a very different book altogether. So, and also
yeah,
brilliant in my opinion, but there's, I mean, it's so funny that she's the same author, Susanna Clark, produced these two very different books.
oh
And
yeah,
they're just very, I mean, stylistically, I mean, and that's talent too, in a way, an author who can write in a completely different style from one book to another is kind of impressive, actually. And she nails
yes,
both, in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell is much longer. It's like sort of a Jane Austen-y kind of Napoleonic era sort of thing. Whereas the Piranesi is much more modern feeling, much more sparse, much more, it's a much faster read. It's a much shorter book, but it's also just a much faster read. But I think you'll like it. that's not a bad place to start with her. She has a short story collection too that is not as well known as those two books.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I was not aware of that. I was
Yep.
only aware of the two books. Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, those are the three things that I know of that she's published. I haven't read the short story collection yet myself, but I would like to. Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Okay, wow.
cool. Nice. All
Yeah.
right. So we've got Terry Brooks covered. We talked about Neil Gaiman. American Gods, by the way, is my favorite Neil Gaiman book, which, I love that book. It's a great book to teach. It's a book that always worked really well in my fantasy novels course.
Uh-huh.
As much as there are certain books that we love in the genre that are popular and they're really fun to read, they're not as conducive to teaching because they're written more as entertainment than as like theme driven kinds of things. Whereas American Gods is dripping with themes. And so it's a really teachable book. There's a lot of meat there. There's a lot to talk about in American Gods. Whereas I'll pick on something, my more, it's a book that I love, so don't get me wrong or anything, but I've taught A Game of Thrones by George R. R. Martin, which is highly entertaining, a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't lead usually to, it can be like this part was really cool kind of conversation, but not so much a deep theme driven thing, at least in my experience. There are themes. I'm not saying there are no themes in A Song of Ice and Fire. They're there, but I don't think they're the main concern of George R. R. Martin. He's writing more to entertain us, which is great. That's one of the important functions of storytelling. So, but yeah, American Gods is a really teachable book. So
that's great to hear. I did like American Gods. It's my least favorite Neil Gaiman, but I did like it. And I think maybe on a reread at some point, I will like it more.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a book that you can, at least I've read probably 4 or 5 times, and every time I'm picking up something new. So yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I still have not read Nancy Boys, and I do want to read that as well.
Yeah.
And I think just in general, comparing George and Neil, I think you're right. Neil very deftly, in my opinion, blends in a lot of thematic elements into all of his writing.
Yep.
In a very intentional way that doesn't feel intentional.
There's to compare. It's a little unfair to make them the stand-ins for this, but I think it works to some degree. Neil Gaiman tends more toward the literary side of fantasy, whereas Martin tends a little bit more in the direction of the more entertainment side of fantasy. And they're both good at both, I'm sure. They both, but that's what they do, and Martin has sold way more books than Neil Gaiman has. So, if that's the goal, then you want to make your books more entertaining. On the other hand, Gaiman appears in literary anthologies. If I'm teaching intro to literature, there's a good chance there'll be a Neil Gaiman short story in the anthology among all these other famous, highly regarded authors. I don't think you're going to see George R. R. Martin in there anytime soon. I guess you make your decision as an author. And they're both very smart people who are very good writers, excellent, brilliant writers. So they know what they're doing. Gaiman has chosen to go in that slightly more literary direction, and Martin does the more popular stuff, and they're both good at it. So
yeah, absolutely. And Neil's a very thematically driven person in terms of his own personal views on the culture and and expressing. He has a lot of great thoughts on the genre of fantasy and
his essays
speculative fiction. And I read The View from the Cheap Seats, and I thought he had a lot of brilliant stuff in there. And so, yeah, he's a very well-rounded individual, I think.
Yeah, very
And
intelligent too. Yeah.
yeah.
So cool. Well, who else? We've got two of your top five, I think, there. So we might as well talk about some of the others. Any others who became, inspirational for you? Because we're still on your reading journey here.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Dr. Seuss was formative in my very early years.
Okay. Yeah.
Of course, and I feel like I've always kind of gravitated to the more whimsical and outlandish. In My imagination is definitely that way, and
Uh-huh.
so the Dr. Seuss books were always a lot of fun for me. I remember my grandmother reading me the Lorax when I was young, and then I
Yeah.
read the Lorax back to her when I was learning to read, and so that was a lot of fun. So I've always really enjoyed that, and of course, uh, Geisel has a lot of subtle themes that he plants into his books
Oh, for sure.
that you don't realize until you're probably older. But
Yeah, I don't know if
um,
I would even call them subtle, but yeah, I mean, he's yeah,
yeah, not all of them are. That's for sure.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, maybe as a kid, they're subtle because you don't perceive them so much. But
Yeah,
as I've read tons of Dr. Seuss to my kids, and
yeah,
I've always thought, oh yeah, interesting that he was tackling these themes, in his books. So yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that was definitely formative for me. I'm trying to remember some of the other ones from my young years. Um, a lot of my middle years were formulated by visual entertainment with movies and things like that, Star Wars and
Sure.
Star Trek, and
Those are good
so
ones.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I did read Dark Horse Comics put out uh oh, it was kind of a sequel to the original Star Wars trilogy. The I can't think of the name of it now. I think it's might be Dark Jedi or whatever, but
Hmm.
Luke goes over to the dark side to prove that you can come back from the dark side,
Oh, huh.
and yeah, it's a very very interesting. And the emperor has clones of himself and everything like that in that story. So a very very early thing on the cloning. And so I read those comics. I did read several comics in my middle years, like the X-Men were always favorite comics of mine.
Mine too. Yeah,
And
X-Men
yeah,
and Spider-Man. Those are my two big
and
ones.
Spider-Man. Oh yeah, I love Spider-Man. Yeah, I'm still a huge Spider-Man fan to this day, and
Have you
X-Men
watched
as
the
well.
movie, the latest movie, the
I
Spider-Man?
did. Yeah, the Into the Spider-Verse, the late
Yeah.
or Across the Spider-Verse, I should say.
Is
Yeah.
that what it is? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it was fantastic. We went opening night. Yeah, it was a
Wow.
lot of fun. Yep.
Nice. Yeah, I haven't
Yeah.
seen it yet myself. My daughter went and saw it with her friends, but
Mhm.
for some reason she didn't want her old man to hang out with her while watching with her friends. Can you imagine that?
Right. Yeah, that's hard to imagine, right?
So
Yeah.
cool. Yeah. So you were a comic book reader too.
Yeah, yeah, I was. Not as much as some people are. I'm not really well versed in comics, but there were several that I vividly remember reading. The Death of Superman series.
Oh, okay.
I read all of those. Um, I didn't read the ones that came after where he got resurrected, and they had some weird ones where there were 4 or 5 different versions of Superman. One was a robot Superman, I think, too, and it was
Wow.
kind of odd, but yeah,
Yeah, I think they sort of just with Superman, they ran out of stuff to do with him, I think. I
yeah,
mean,
they did.
Gary, what do you do with a character who is so powerful? He can do anything, and
Mhm.
they just sort of went in all these different directions, which none of which really worked that much for me. Although I adored Superman as a kid, I was
Yeah.
into the Christopher Reeve Superman
Oh,
films.
yeah, great movies.
I mean, in my mind, I know I have no problems with Henry. What's his last name? Cavill.
Yeah, uh-huh.
I think he's great. He's done a great job as Superman too. But in my mind, it's always going to be Christopher Reeve.
Yeah. Oh, same. Yeah, Christopher Reeve was definitely my formative Superman, and I loved that he had a cameo in Smallville. Uh,
Huh.
because I did like the Smallville series. In fact, Tom Welling I think was a great Superman, great Clark Kent. I think Michael Rosenbaum is probably my favorite Lex Luthor, which
Huh.
is weird to say because Gene Hackman did a great job, but I
Oh,
don't.
yeah.
He was kind of more of a corny Lex Luthor, not really the Lex Luthor that you expect from the comics. And I think Michael Rosenbaum was a much more well-rounded Lex Luthor for the Smallville series.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so that was great. And I did like Henry Cavill. Um, the guy that they got on the CW series playing Superman now doesn't click with me. He's too
Oh,
pretty.
oh.
You know,
I
I
haven't
mean,
seen it. Yeah.
Superman has always been handsome, right? But he's more of like a rugged, ruddy handsome versus the
Pretty
pretty
rugged
boy.
guy. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah.
Cool. So what else? I mean, we just talked again about two of your top five. So who are the
Mhm.
others? Who was at least one of the others?
Oh yeah, one of the others is Erin Morgenstern.
Oh, nice. Okay.
She's actually
The
my
Night
second.
Circus, the Night Circus,
Mhm.
right?
The
Okay.
Night Circus and the Starless Sea. Those I always say those are both in the running for my second favorite book of all time. I can't really choose between the
Wow.
two, but if I
Again,
had to,
more of the whimsy. You do like the whimsy, don't
Mhm,
you?
I
Yeah.
do.
Okay.
Yeah, more whimsy, more atmospheric. Yeah, they're both beautiful stories. Um, usually when I think of one over the other, I will pick the Night Circus, but the Starless Sea is a beautiful novel. It
Okay.
really is. Yeah.
So sell me on either or both of those.
Yeah, absolutely. So they're both they're both testaments to books in different ways. The Night Circus uh takes place in what feels kind of like an Edwardian or Victorian setting, and there's a traveling circus that magically disappears and reappears, and it only appears at night.
Ah, okay.
So in certain phases of the moon and things like that, and everybody is kind of on the lookout for when the Night Circus will magically appear, and you've got all sorts of different fun characters. There's a contortionist. There's two twins that train cats to perform in a show, and so Erin Morgenstern's a cat lover, so right away she wins my heart. Um,
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're a cat guy. Yeah,
I
yeah.
am a cat guy, and the two main characters in the story have been thrust into each other's lives um, as a kind of a face-off against each other with their magical abilities by their by their mentors or their what's the word I want by their patrons, more or less.
Okay, okay.
They've been hired by patrons to learn the art of deception through magic and things like that,
Huh.
and to eventually compete against each other with the goal of one of them is essentially eventually supposed to kill the other. And because behind closed doors, these two have made a bet with each other about who will win.
Okay.
And it's so much fun. It's such a unique story, and the whimsy is heavy. And if you like circuses, it's just a really neat take. It's almost it almost borders on the macabre circus, but not quite.
Okay.
It's not quite there, but it's definitely a very dark undertone to the circus itself.
All right. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
And then the Starless Sea is a wholly different story, but equally as beautiful. That there's a fellow who uh I almost got Neo vibes from him from the Matrix,
Oh,
because he's always on the search for this secret society that he's heard about. And he finds a book in a library that was that has nods to this secret society that not a lot of people seem to know about. And he finds a way to be in just the right place at the right time and be inducted into this secret society that lives in the undergrounds of the city,
okay.
on the border uh of this magical world that kind of bleeds into the real world, that people call the Starless Sea.
All right.
And and there's cats, of course, and there's unique rites and puzzles that he has to get through. He has there's some Alice in Wonderland elements too, because he gets into this one cavern where he has to pick between this one stone and this other item, and depending on which one he chooses, uh, uh, that will open up different doors for him. And it's just a fantastic read.
All right. I like it. I like the
Yeah.
premise of these books, the premises of these books. Just
Mhm.
that much sounds really intriguing. So very, very
Yeah.
cool.
I think if you like Ocean at the End of the Lane, which I know you do,
Yep.
I think you would definitely like both of those books.
All right. Cool.
Yeah.
Good
She's
sell.
actually my second favorite author of all time.
Wow. She's
Oh,
in the number
yeah.
two spot. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Erin
Uh-huh.
Morgenstern. Well, good sell, I would say. So
Yeah.
fantastic. And you have videos on your channel about these books, or
I do. Yep, I have videos for both of them, and I even
nice.
have an unboxing video that I did for a very fancy special edition of the Night Circus.
Wow. All right.
Yeah, I saw she had posted something on her social media that about this place that was releasing a special signed, numbered, and lettered editions of her books, and I said, well, I have to have it.
Cool.
uh yeah, it's and I would read it too. I read my special editions.
Oh, they're not just dust
Uh
collectors. Okay.
yeah, they're not just dust collectors, although I do have a reading copy as well that I would probably gravitate to more just because it's
Yeah.
so fancy, but I would read from it as well. So
Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
I'm not really a book collector in the sense that many of our friends are on this platform where they get these special editions, and then I usually am
Mhm.
the one who's like kind of outside the crowd, but I'm kind of like, that would be really fun, or I'm
Mhm.
not quite in the crowd, but I'm kind of got I'm watching and I'm looking, and I'd like that special edition for sure, but it's X amount of dollars or whatever for it. And I've always
Exactly.
been, maybe because ever since my grad school days, I've got most of my books used and they were already
Mhm.
beat up, and I beat them up even more. So I've
Mhm.
always been one of those people who just, books are basically, well loved in my household. So
Oh
special
yeah.
editions, the idea sounds great, but I don't know. I've never been a collector like that. So do you have a lot of other special editions, or is that just sort of, this was a very exceptional case?
This was a very, very exceptional case, at least for one this fancy. I'm very selective with what special editions I buy. I reserve it only for the best of the best. So Good Omens, I have a really nice fancy copy of that.
Okay.
But it wasn't super expensive. The Night Circus was expensive. But and the Lord of the Rings series, I have the new illustrated ones by Tolkien, as well as the illustrated editions by Alan Lee.
Nice.
Yeah, other than that, I don't really have any special editions. I reserve it for books that I really am passionate about, that have just really gripped my life.
Yeah.
And other than that, I'll just buy whatever for other books. And I buy a lot of ebooks too, so I don't buy a lot of physical books anymore.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah, space is an issue, that's for
it
sure.
is, yeah, yeah.
So cool. Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So now we've got three of the five covered.
Mhm.
So I feel like we're on a roll. I mean, I don't want to steal any fun. Your favorite, your top 5 or top 10 video that people will, I'm sure, will go check out, but or you maybe talk about them in more length. But
Mhm.
who are some of your other favorites that you'd want to mention for sure that people would
Oh
expect to see
yeah.
videos about on your channel and that sort of thing?
Yeah, definitely. Dan Brown is one.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm a big fan of the Dan Brown, the Robert Langdon series.
Okay.
Those are the only books of his that I've read so far. I've not read, uh, let's see, I think he has one called The Digital Fortress and
Oh,
things
okay.
like that. I've not
So that
read
does
those yet, but
include the Da Vinci Code, right?
yes,
Okay.
yes, the Da Vinci Code. I've read all of the Robert Langdon books, and I absolutely love them. He's one of my top authors for sure.
Okay.
Um, I haven't read anything else by him yet because he hasn't released anything else, but
Hmm.
I think I will probably pick up anything that Travis Baldree writes, because I absolutely fell in love with Legends and Lattes.
Now he does have another book coming out though, doesn't
He
he?
does, yeah. Yeah, he has a prequel to that one coming out called Bookshops and Bone Dust, I believe.
Okay. Yeah.
And I love it. It's such a great book. So I will probably read anything from him that he puts out, or at least give it a try.
Now, I haven't read Legends and Lattes yet, or we'll certainly pick it up at some point. But
Mhm.
now Travis Baldree is also an audiobook narrator, right?
He is. Yeah, I know he narrated most, if not all, of the Cradle books.
Okay.
I don't know anything else that he's narrated, but I think he has narrated quite a few others as well,
I mean,
including his
there's a
own
lot of
book.
Cradle books, right? That's the Will White series. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't do very many audiobooks. I
I
do
don't do
prefer,
any.
yeah, I prefer to read physically, but will say I've done a lot of immersive reading, especially with the Dresden Files, because
Okay.
James Marsters is absolutely brilliant. So
Now, are you current with Dresden Files?
I am. I finally caught up. I finished it. And Jim Butcher is another one that I'll mention as one of my favorites. I will
Well,
read probably anything that he's written.
have you
Uh,
read the Codex Alera series by
I
him?
have not. It's on my list to read for sure. I did read The Aeronaut's Windlass, and I'm looking forward to the next Cinder Spires book coming out.
Okay. Yeah, I've only
So,
read Butcher's stuff. I've only read the first 6 Dresden books.
mhm.
And now I'm kind of at that point where those were all fine for me to use as palate cleansers to
Uh-huh.
take a break from bigger epic stuff. And now I feel like I'm probably getting close to that point in the series where it gets harder to walk away after reading one of the books, right? You want to
Mhm.
go right on to the next one because I think they get more and more connected. Is that right? Into
They
a
do.
parent kind of series. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you are in for such a wild ride, Philip. Yeah, especially once you hit book 12 changes. Once you hit changes,
Yeah.
I will be shocked if you're able to stop.
Wow.
I really will.
And
Yeah,
it's still going. It's an ongoing series, right?
it is. Yeah.
How many books are out now in Dresden?
Let's see. 17 novels. Actually, 16 novels, 18 if you count the short story collections.
Okay.
And then he's got two more that he's announced, I believe, 5 more books in the series, maybe 6 that are coming,
Oh,
but
okay.
he's got one that he's currently writing now, which I think is going to be 12 Hours is the name of it.
Huh.
I could be wrong. He's got 2 that have been officially announced in terms of the names. There's 12 Hours and Mirror Mirror, but I don't know which one is going to come out first, but probably sometime next year. I know he's writing it right now.
Wow, good for him.
So
Yes.
yeah, I know
That's
he has an end in mind. I think he said he's planning on ending right around book 25. So
25. Wow.
yeah, yeah,
Good grief.
yeah.
Okay.
And there's still very easy reads. They're very quick reads, but
Uh-huh.
it just gets much harder to stop after a certain point.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm waiting to get on that roller coaster till I have a little bit more of my TBR cleared, I think would be best for me.
I
So,
respect that. I do, because yeah, once you get to a certain point, you're gonna want to have it cleared because it's hard.
huh. Okay.
I got to a point where I was reading 1 book a month, and then for the short story collections, I read them both back to back in the same month, and I did the same for Peace Talks and Battleground. I read those both in the same month.
Okay.
So and then I was done. So yeah,
Wow. All
and
right.
he's got a bunch of micro fiction on his website that plays into it as well. So it's never ending.
Yeah, I've heard there are short stories that you could read to supplement certain points in the series, but
Yeah.
I I have a lot of catching up to do with Dresden, that's for sure. So
Yeah.
cool. Well, that's a lot to look forward to. So he's another one of your favorites, Butcher.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Nice.
N.K. Jemisin is becoming one of my favorites as well.
Oh, I love Broken Earth. That's all I've read
Yeah.
ever is the Broken Earth trilogy, but I do love it. I think it's tremendous.
Oh, I do too. Broken Earth is easily one of my favorite trilogies. I just read The City We Became last month,
Oh, nice.
and it was absolutely fantastic. Uh, it was a bit, it wasn't as good for me as The Broken Earth was,
Okay.
up until the end of the book. The end left me reeling and just wanting to know more. So
Okay.
um, I'm gonna buy the set. I had the first one on ebook. I'm gonna buy the second one on ebook as well,
Okay.
but it's not in the price range I want to pay. So because I want to read it very soon, I'll probably borrow it from the library with
Ah,
Libby. So
yeah.
yeah,
That's
but
good way to do it. Yeah.
yeah, I still don't I still don't really like paying $14.99 for an ebook.
That seems like you might as well buy the physical book,
Exactly.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I had to think about ebook pricing a lot with my own books coming out, and it's tricky to know. Of course, somebody like Jemison, who's much higher profile, I guess, can if I mean, she probably isn't the only one making the decision, I guess, about the price.
Right.
Publisher is the one, but I guess they feel like they can charge that for an ebook,
Mhm.
which is ooh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely want to read more of Jemison stuff because I really do enjoy the Broken Earth trilogy. I think it's brilliant, and she's good at endings. I think she's really good at endings.
She is. She's very good at endings. And I really love the Broken Earth trilogy because by the end, once you get to the ending, all of the second person stuff that kind of felt weird at the beginning,
Makes
all of a
sense.
sudden makes sense why it was written that way.
Yeah, yeah,
And yeah, it because a lot of people complain, a lot of people are turned off by the second person, and that's why they step away from the series. And I try to tell people, if you read it to the end, you'll understand why she did that.
yep, yep.
And yeah, so I realized by the end that it was very intentional. And after you've been reading it for a while, it's not bothersome.
Yeah,
So
you get used to it. It did throw
yeah,
me some, I will admit, at first.
yeah.
There's all this you stuff.
Yeah.
So, but I got used to it, and then I thought, oh, this was bold and brilliant the way it was
Yeah,
executed. So yeah, good stuff.
yeah.
That's marvelous. And any other writers you want to make sure we all know that you love?
Um, I think that's probably it. I do like Brandon Sanderson,
Okay. Yeah.
but and I did have him on a favorite author list, and he is, but I think there's other authors that have kind of overshadowed him for me, but he is a great writer,
Uh-huh.
and I've quite
And are
enjoyed
you
his
current
stuff.
with the Cosmere, or are there only certain parts of it that you're reading?
I'm mostly current with the Cosmere,
Wow.
except for Mistborn. I just barely started Mistborn Era 2.
Oh,
I read the first book and absolutely loved it.
okay.
In fact, I liked it better than Mistborn Era 1, which isn't a very popular
Oh,
opinion.
I think you're in a minority on that one. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but other than that, I've read all of the Cosmeres so far. Yeah.
Interesting. Wow. Okay. Then
Yeah.
you read a lot of Sanderson. Wow. I've only
Yeah.
read the original Mistborn trilogy
Uh-huh.
and the first three Stormlight Archive books. So, and I do intend to stay current with the Stormlight Archive, though I haven't
Yes.
read Rhythm of War yet. I intend to do that shortly before the fifth book comes out. So I don't
That's
have
a good idea.
yeah, so I don't have to reread it.
Yeah.
Because I missed that bandwagon when everybody in the entire universe was reading Rhythm of War. I just got busy with other things and I just didn't get to it. And it got to a point where I was like, maybe I'll just wait. So that's what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good plan. I feel like even though it would be a chore to reread the book, I feel like I would probably want to at least reread Rhythm of War before the next book comes out,
Yeah.
and it's probably going to come out next year, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Well, whenever
Yeah,
he says it comes out is probably when it will come out because he's pretty reliable about that.
he
So,
is. Yeah, he said he's on track to. He's supposed to turn in the first draft on December 15th.
okay.
And so if everything goes according to plan, he said it'll be out sometime next year. So
Oh, okay. Wow.
yeah.
Well, that'll
And then
be,
that
I'm sure in 2024, there'll be a plenty of buzz on book five, which I don't remember what it's called, but has he told us the title?
he hasn't. He's
Okay.
told us some ideas that have been tossed around, but he hasn't told us an official title yet.
And it's the end of
Um,
the first arc in
mhm.
Starlight Archive, and then he's going to have a second later arc of 5 books. That's the plan still.
Right. Yeah, that's my understanding. From what I heard, I think there's going to be like a 10-year time gap between the first and second arcs.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So we'll see some
Yeah.
of the same characters at least then.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. I like when authors intentionally build in the time gaps as opposed to having them just happen by happenstance.
Yeah.
Uh, I heard that uh, Daniel Abraham and Ty Franck did that with The Expanse.
Oh, okay.
I yeah, from after book 6, I guess there's a 30-year time gap.
Interesting.
Uh,
Yeah, Daniel
so
Abraham, I've only read the Long Price Quartet by Daniel Abraham. That's all of his that I've read, but he has gaps in those 4 books. Every book, between each of the books, there's a significant number of years gap.
oh wow.
And he
Okay.
handles it really, really well. Just about as well as I've seen it handled. And they're fairly short books too.
Hmm.
Really great series. I enjoyed the LPQ a lot. Uh,
Yeah, I've heard really good things about it. I know Alan talks about it a
Oh yeah, he's the
bunch.
long price prophet. Alan is.
Yeah, yeah, it's one that I definitely want to get to. I've been very impressed with The Expanse so far.
Mhm.
I came to it after having watched all of the first 5 seasons of the show. And reading the books, I've been very impressed with how faithfully they adapted it to the show.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've read the first 3 books and I absolutely love it. So I'm gonna finish the series, and
Nice. Nice.
yeah, I'm very excited.
Well, we talked a lot about reading. Let's
Mhm.
talk a little about writing. I think
Yeah,
that you are a writer. Is that
I am.
correct, Chaz? What are you working on? If
That
you don't
is
mind, say as
correct.
much or as little as you want about
Oh,
what.
sure. Yeah, absolutely. So so my first book, of course, is Talendor's Guest.
Okay.
And that I wrote that kind of as a introduction to my world. I am doing a multiverse like a lot of people do.
Cool.
And so it's kind of an introduction to different characters in the multiverse. My newest book, which has been through my beta readers now, and I still have to get back to the edits for, is I'm hoping to release it in October or November, get it out before Christmas.
Okay.
It's called The Nomad's Crucible,
I like
and
the title. Yeah.
thank you. And it's about an assassin who goes through his own uh his own awakening to who he is and where he's come from, and so that crucible mentality, kind of like a personal crucible. And um
Cool. Are they
yeah.
standalones? Are both books standalones?
They are. Yeah, yeah.
All
So
right.
I haven't really gotten the itch to write sagas yet, but I may eventually. But I do like to write standalones. So
The world needs more fantasy standalones.
I
So
think so too. I think so too. Yeah.
yeah,
Uh,
cool.
yeah.
I like it.
I did hire a cover designer. She's working on it right now, and I've still got to figure out the whole arc thing, and sending out arcs and when and how
Yeah.
many. And
Do you have a projected release date?
right now I'm shooting for November 1st.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, that may change. It may not even happen by the end of the year. It just depends on how quickly all the pieces fall into place. And
Okay.
but
You want to
that's my
beat
goal.
Brandon Sanderson anyway. So
Yeah,
before
yeah.
everybody starts reading Stormlight 5, you want to get it done before then.
That's true. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So
Cool. So
yeah,
November 1st, and I'm sure that could change, but it's a
mhm,
good rough estimate, I'm sure. But wow. And
yeah.
how would you categorize both books in terms of, are they epic fantasy? Are they what would you just how would you describe them?
Yeah. So the first book, Talendor's Guest, um is somewhat epic fantasy, but it's more, well, I don't want to say epistolary, but it's written in a way that conveys kind of an Arabian Nights feel.
Oh,
I've had people actually compare it to more of an Arabian Nights type of scenario, because it's essentially a mysterious traveler. uh he gets trapped in a cave with a dragon, and the dragon threatens to eat him if he doesn't tell him good stories. And so
oh,
uh,
nice. Okay.
this is he's kind of a world hopper, and he tells the dragon about all the different tales from different worlds that he's encountered. And
Oh, that sounds like fun. Yeah.
yeah, so
Oh,
it
can you
was,
spell the title for us?
yeah, absolutely. Talindor, Talendor's Guest.
Talendor's Guest.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so Talendor would be the dragon then, or
Yes. Yep. Talendor is the dragon.
all
Yep.
right.
And
Yeah.
and it's a talking dragon. I won't say it's too heavily inspired by Smaug, but
Uh-huh.
yeah, definitely in that vein. Yeah, Talendor was a lot of fun to write.
Cool.
And so yeah, it definitely feels kind of like a short story collection in some ways.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But that's awesome. Yeah.
And then the Nomad's Crucible is a sci fantasy, although very heavily on the fantasy elements versus the sci-fi elements.
Okay. Okay.
So it is kind of a dystopian world. There is technology, but it's it's very um it's very sparsely used because people don't trust technology very
Mm,
much.
okay.
So yeah, so it has very specific use cases, and there's things that have gone wrong in previous epochs of time in this world with technology.
A bit of
So
a dystopia then. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Cool. Nice, Chaz. All
yeah,
right. Yeah. Well, I
yeah.
wish you absolutely the best and much fulfillment, and I'll be checking out your books for sure.
Thank you, Philip. I appreciate that. I'm very excited for what's to come, and I've got other ideas that I'm ruminating on, but I haven't put a lot of them to significant paper yet.
Okay.
Um, so
Neat.
yeah, it's hard to find time for writing and booktubing and work and life
Oh,
and
I know it. I know it. It is hard. This is a hobby that takes up a lot of time, and if you're trying to write as well, that takes up a lot of time, and then you have to pay your bills somehow or other because Lord knows this
Mhm.
hobby won't do it,
Right.
and
Yeah,
neither will writing. So
right. That's for sure.
yeah, that's I think a problem we have there, but it's
Unless you get super lucky.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. But in the meantime, though, we are enjoying ourselves, aren't we? So
Oh, absolutely. And I have to say, Philip, you know, I forget who I was commenting on. I think it was Joanna's video the other day. The I love The Way of Edan.
oh, thank you. Yeah, you got a
And
nice review of
the
it, which I really liked. Yeah.
the cold open for The Way of Edan was wonderful. Had me on the edge of my seat.
Hmm.
And I haven't gotten very far in The Prophet of Edan yet, but I have to say the cold open for that. I thought The Way of Edan was good, but you cranked out another banger. You really did. So that opening prologue was fantastic. And I won't go into spoilers, but I'll just leave it at that. But it's great.
Well, I'm
And
glad you enjoy it. Thank you, Chaz. Yeah.
yeah, and I really hope more people check out your books. And I think a lot of people are. I think from what I've seen, you're having good success.
Yeah. I mean, to tell you the truth, it's just gratifying to have people reading the story and
Yeah,
some people reaching out to say they enjoyed it. And that is one of the best feelings
yes.
in the whole world, really. So, yeah.
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 Yeah, it is kind of to your point. I didn't really go into it to make money as a full-time writer, although I would love that. But
Yeah. Yeah.
I enjoy telling stories, and I had stories in my head that aren't going to stop talking to me if I don't get them on paper. So
That's right. That's
and
right.
if somebody picks it up and enjoys it, that's all I care about. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
It does feel like, in a way, it is one thing for these stories for us to be imagining them and even committing them to writing, but it doesn't quite feel like they're alive until other people are reading the stories. So that's a special thing to happen, I guess. And we're
mhm,
fortunate to live in an era when that is an increasingly viable thing to do, to
mhm,
self-publish and to get your stories out there and be in a community of people who appreciate those kinds of stories. So we're I think
mhm.
very fortunate in that respect.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you mentioned briefly in one of your other videos, or maybe it was an interview that you were doing with somebody. Oh, actually, I think it was the Legendarium Green Team. I listened to your interview with them.
Podcast, yeah.
And yeah, and I think it was there that you talked about that you also had a fourth novel in the Adan saga, or kind of maybe a side story or a novella or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. It's a standalone sequel. It's
Hmm.
all written.
Hmm.
I do need to revise it and go over it with my developmental editor, AP Canavan, the Critical Dragon.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is written. I'm hoping to release that in 2024.
Oh,
So
great.
I guess I'll be competing with Brandon Sanderson.
Right. Yeah, yeah, we might both be. That's
Well, I don't know about that, but people can read more than one book in a year. So yeah.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, that's for
but yeah.
sure.
Yep. So I do have that ready to roll, and I hope to write more books in that world. I think that
Good.
is still calling me very much. So yeah.
That's great. Yeah, and mine is definitely calling me too. I have a lot of things planned, and the just a little teaser. If you end up liking the Traveler in Talendor's Guest, there are others of his kind that will pop up in future novels, including the Nomad's Crucible. So
Oh, I like it. Okay.
yeah, there are others of his kind.
Nice. Okay. So you are
Yeah,
putting in some connections then. All right.
yeah. Mhm.
I like it. I like it. All right. Well, Chaz, this has been a lot of fun.
It
And
has
I
been.
want to thank you for spending this time with me and for being a really wonderful person and a really a great presence in our community. It means a lot to have really kind, generous people like you around. So I want to emphasize that. And if you guys haven't checked out Chaz's channel, Bookish Chas, there will be a link in the description. So go and see his content on some of the authors that we just talked about. So Chaz, thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Philip. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm so happy we could make time for this, and thanks again for inviting me.
Oh, it's a huge pleasure and an honor. All right, everybody. Until next time.